This is day 2, open session of the 14th edition of ICIC. At this juncture, let us now proceed to the ICIC Technical Working Group reports. To present the exploratory survey findings, I now turn over the floor to the Director of FOI and Transparency of the Information Commissioner's Office, United Kingdom, Director Warren Seddon, and to the Director for Monitoring and Oversight and Access to Information of the Office of the Comptroller General, Brazil, Director Sibyl Cesardo Amaral, Brazil. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Good morning.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone. I'm going to kick us off. If you have the slides up on the screen, please, and give a bit of an overview of the work of the working group so far. And I'll hand over to Sibyl for some of the detail in the report that we have circulated in the pack and that we're aiming to publish after the conference. Hopefully soon, and then we'll kind of outline some of the next steps of the working group. If you go to the next slide, please. As you can see, Brazil and the United Kingdom volunteered to co-chair the working group, which was set up, I think, last September, from the top of my head, and we've got a really good spread of ICIC members that are part of the working group, and we're really grateful for the input that we've received over the course of the last 9 months or so as we've been developing the work programme. If you go to the next slide. The aims of the working group as a whole have been to agree a common and a workable definition of transparency, with the aim of kind of underpinning that with some globally agreed principles at ICIC level, and to kind of establish how to achieve transparency by design, and what the shared principles are that should underpin it, as well as kind of defining what that then looks like in practice, so how you would implement it. And to inform the work of the working group going forward, we ran a survey last year to kind of gather some empirical data from colleagues from the ICIC membership, to really learn from everyone else about what everyone else was doing in this space already, and what the kind of common themes were that could inform a set of principles to kind of underpin that globally. If you go to the next slide, please. I should say at this point, I'm really grateful for the work that Fabiana Marinaro and Alan Capper in the UK ICO office have done to develop both the survey in the first instance and the report that's been circulated in the pack. It's been a not insignificant piece of work with lots of translation from different languages to bring together the report as a whole, and I think it's shaping up really well so far. We asked a mix of kind of closed and open questions as part of the survey to inform the findings that we've made. It was mostly qualitative in terms of the feedback that we received, although there is some data as per the next slide, which sets out kind of where from the ICIC membership we received responses. We got 39, which is not a bad return rate, and thank you very much everyone that did feedback to us. Again, we got a pretty good geographical spread. The tip of the hat goes to colleagues in South America who won in terms of being the highest proportion of responses, and thank you very much everyone that did get back to us. And then if we go to the last slide that you'll have to hear from me from for a little bit, I just wanted to set out some of the key findings that we have made in relation to the report. You might need to tab along to get all 4 of them going. There we go. Sorry, if we go back. There we go. So there were kind of 4 key findings that came out of the survey that we conducted. The first one is probably fairly obvious given who we were asking the question of, and the kind of organisational feedback we received around effectively the reason why transparency by design is important is about increasing trust and enabling public participation in decision making. Having said that, there was a really good point that was made in one of the group breakout sessions yesterday from colleagues in Israel about actually that is probably too simplistic. Transparency itself doesn't automatically lead to trust, because what transparency can do is show bad governance as well as good governance, and if you see bad governance, trust is not necessarily what you first leap to if you're a member of the public. What transparency hopefully does is encourages the good governance by shining a light on what is happening. So there's a kind of an organic growth of trust as more transparency increases the kind of quality of governance that happens. And I think it's worth us kind of reflecting on that when we're kind of making those points in future. The second key finding that we made was around what people were already doing. So 33 of the 39 organisations that responded said that the kind of key thing that they did to kind of support proactive transparency by public bodies in their area was producing guidance and having things like an information commissioner's office in place, etc. But another point that was made was the importance for the authorities that could do it of proactively raising awareness as well. Again, this is a theme that's come up at the conference, which has been really interesting. If you've not spoken to Laura from the Carter Centre in the US about the work that they are doing to do more in this space to make FOI, access to information, feel more tangible and real proactively to those people that most need it. I think that is really important. The authorities that responded to us, only 17 said that this was work that they were doing at the moment. So less than half of the organisations that responded. Obviously resources is a key part of that. It's certainly a key part at the UK level for why up until this point we haven't been able to do as much of that as we would like. It's something that we're trying to grow at the moment. Actually, we're learning from our colleagues in Scotland who have been better in this space than us, frankly, at the UK level over the last few years to do more. It is telling that again there were only 17 organisations that were specifically targeting activity at vulnerable groups and people who would be less likely to engage in FOI processes proactively, and only 16 were doing activity directly targeted at schools and young people to raise awareness. So again, I think that's something that we can reflect on when developing the principles around, in an ideal world, what should we be doing? Those of us that have commissioners' offices to be more proactive in this space and raise awareness of people's rights. Another key finding was about the distinction that there was in kind of how public records are developed. The majority of organisations that responded, so 36 of the 39, reflected that they did have a legal framework in place to manage and preserve records, but significantly less, 24 organisations said that within their jurisdiction there was a kind of, again, a proactive duty to document. Again, that's something that we don't have at the UK level. We raised it recently in a report to Parliament in respect of the growth, particularly among the political classes, but also at kind of public official level, of the use of non-corporate communication channels, so WhatsApp and private emails, which exploded during the pandemic. And there's quite a big debate in the UK at the moment about what impact that's had on the quality of the public record and how that can impact on the learning that comes out of crisis. And one of the things that we raised in our report to Parliament is, should we have a more proactive duty to document? And it feels like that might be a discussion that a lot of jurisdictions are having post-COVID, and based on the evidence that we saw in the survey that we conducted about the gap that there is across the world between the kind of more reactive, retain what you've created, but not make sure that you create X, Y, and Z. And then finally, again, not unsurprising given who we were surveying, there was real focus on what the importance that access to information laws have on the kind of effective approach to transparency by design. But also within that there should be stronger duties, requirements and information available to public authorities about how to get information out proactively, and that's something we want to dig into more, assuming that everyone is happy for the working group to continue, which I will come back to shortly as part of the development of principles. But I'll hand over to Belle now to cover some more of the detail of what we found as part of the survey.
Thank you, Warren, and good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here talking about the results of this work group, what we have collected through the survey. I would like to, before I get into the slide, I would like only to highlight that when we're talking here about transparency by design, most of the time, people think of transparency only on transparency portal and publishing things online. But I would like to highlight that we're not only about talking about publishing big amounts of information online. It's about redesigning, it's also about redesigning administrative process and procedures to treat information in advance since its production, since it's generated, since the information is generated, thinking on ways to make disclosure simpler and faster. This means, for example, identifying exemptions in forehand, anonymizing personal data, or even producing two versions of documents, one at which maybe only the extract of information that may be published and disclosed is defined in advance. I bring it here because this is something that we are having a hard way in Brazil because we do have a lot of experience when it comes to transparency portals, but when it comes to providing information as for information requests, people sometimes say that I cannot give it because I will have a lot of extra work trying to identify in documents if there is any sensitive information that may or may not be published. And this is what transparency by design is about. Thinking in advance and treating the information in advance before getting an information request. Okay, so getting back to the slides, please. One questions of the survey was about the risks that arise when implementing transparency measures and also the mitigation of these risks. Considering that transparency exists within a wider legal and socio-economic context where other legitimate interests exist, disclosing information proactively can create tension between the push for greater transparency and the risk transparency can pose in other areas. The slide shows the three options that the members of ICIC could choose as risks related to transparency, to proactive transparency. 77% of the members who responded the survey mentioned that the main risk is about privacy. This was followed by the risk to national security. 40% of the entities who responded said that this proactive transparency could get to rise risks to national security and also to fraud risks. Data privacy risks, in fact, also represents a risk to openness. We've been discussing it here because institutions need to be aware of the necessity to balance data privacy protection and the right to information related to subjects that are of high public interests. That is why government needs to think in advance on transparency by design and also privacy by design. As for national security, the respondents mentioned the risk of spoliation, for example, of public information by hostile actors. When it comes to fraud risks, they were associated, as stated by some respondents, to the increase of cybernetic risks, and also security risks associated with transparent AI system, artificial intelligence systems. That is, making information available about the way in which the AI system works and training data could make open technical details on the system, and which would make it more vulnerable to attacks. It's also important to mention that having exemptions, it was something that we gathered through the survey, that having the exemptions established by law, it was perceived as a safeguard, which helped a balance to strike between the public interest in transparency and the protection of other legitimate interests. Going to the next slide, please. So now we're going to show what regulators are doing to encourage the adoption and implementation of transparency measures. Here are the highlights. Warren has mentioned it previously as the key findings, that providing guidance on access to information is really important. And we had many countries stating that this was the way, the approach that they were working on. Also, providing advice to government agents on how to foster transparency and properly apply the exemptions. Providing a proactive transparency guide, so not only guidance on access to information, but guide on what to publish online and how to make more information available on high-value themes, subjects, not only making lots of records available, lots of data available, but important data available. And also, it's really important to work on public engagement and awareness rising. In some sessions during the ICIC conference this year, people are talking about the need to educate and raise awareness about access to information and transparency. And this is also one of the findings that we got here at the survey. Next slide, please. Here we bring some examples of transparency measures. First of one, reactive openness, disclosure in response to information requests. Also, proactive transparency, publishing information of general interest proactively, for example, information on spending revenues, bidding process, contracts, among others, things that everyone should try to make it available in advance, regardless receiving information requests. Also, measures that were mentioned by some countries were open government initiatives, which is closely related to providing ways to foster public participation on decision-making and public policy design and oversight. And also transparency in digital projects. Next, please. Here are the success factors that the members highlighted and that the team from England could compile from the survey answers and responses. Actually, practices were grouped in three main success factors: efficiency and regulatory gains. For example, we should bring as an example here that having integrated FOI online portals appear to be capability and lead to a more effective use of resource. Besides, it also reduces the risk of dispersing information while ensuring consistency in published information and reporting. The other one is the development of synergistic relations and collaborative partnerships. We have seen that some initiatives resulted from a multi-stakeholder approach, which allow regulators or governmental agencies to partner with a diverse range of stakeholders to provide better solutions to foster transparency. It's important to mention that by involving relevant stakeholders at early stage, help building consensus around the initiative that's going to be developed and introduced, minimizing the risk of disconnect between what government and regulators are trying to achieve on the one hand, and the needs of public bodies, applicants on the other hand. Another relevant success factor is to open and diffuse knowledge as much as we can. Here we mention, and people mention open data initiatives as good approach. Some researchers are considered, for example, open data as the third wave of transparency. First wave was the FOI Act, where reactive transparency was possible. The second wave is the proactive transparency, normally related to accessing information on transparency portal. And this third wave of transparency regards opening data, publishing data in open format, structured as data sheets like CSV files, for example, in a way that it may be easily accessed and processed by computers. This may unlock the potential to further knowledge creation and sharing, and also to innovation. Finally, next please. The survey allowed us to get to a list of key takeaways. First, first we have the key challenges. The key challenge to get to transparency by design is providing accessibility and functionality, resource constraint and capability challenges. Also, there is the cultural resistance to change the way people are used to do things, and maybe putting more information available will get to some barriers on how people, the cultural aspects of not publishing everything and try to have some information not published by default. And also encouraging take-up. Next, please. So finally, we got to the list of key takeaways. The first one is reactive openness and proactive transparency, and they fit each other. So, disclosing logs of previous answers, FOI requests, for example, and enlarging the information proactively disclosed, especially if they are about high-value data of high value for society, may be a way to foster transparency and to reduce the number of FOI requests that we get on reactive transparency. Also, access to information laws should keep pace with technological developments. Besides, regulators have a key role to play in fostering transparency and should be equipped with the relevant power to ensure compliance with the law and have the ability to exercise these powers effectively. Transparency is and needs to be by design and by default, since maximum transparency should be the general rule, while secrecy is the exception. And also, as Warren also mentioned, a lack of fidelity to document risks creating some transparency gaps that will be difficult to transpass later. I will now hand it back to Warren that will continue the presentation.
Thank you very much. So the next steps of the working group that we were hoping to get agreement for today and as part of the conference is that the working group should continue The aim is to publish the report that we've developed on the ICIC website, so that it's an open resource for others to reflect on and use. And the aim of the working group over the next 12 months will be to develop those principles for transparency by design. It feels like a timely piece of work. Hansi mentioned earlier about the kind of importance of algorithmic transparency, which is a theme that was touched on in the report. It was striking actually the relatively low number of authorities that have the space to think about that yet, and that's something that we can maybe include in the principles and put a little bit of a framework around. And the aim would be then to bring those principles to the conference next year for broader agreement as part of the formal session. So that was the presentation for now. We had created space for questions if we've got the facilities to do so. If not, we're getting a wrap-up sign anyway, so we might not have time for questions. But do feel free to grab us outside the session today if you're interested in joining the working group, or if you have any questions about the report. But that feels like a natural conclusion otherwise. Thank you very much everyone for listening to us.